Welcome, Spartans, to Halo TV Plus, part of Evolved, your home for Halo. I'm your host, Oran, and on Halo TV Plus, my guest and I recap Halo's original TV show, Halo the Series, and we discuss its contents and unique canon within the Silver Timeline. Joining me tonight for Episode 7 of Season 2 Thermopylae is Tom. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hello, it is good to be back.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to hear your voice. It's been like 2 years, I think, pretty much since the last time we recorded Season 1.
It has. What can I say? I left Evolved as a boy and I've returned as a man.
Oh, that's so great. And now we can continue this journey on into your manhood. Well, if you're a returning listener, you know this already, but if you're just joining us for Halo TV Plus, welcome. We publish 2 podcast episodes to accompany each Halo the Series episode. So this is our commentary episode, where in a moment, Tom and I will watch Thermopylae and discuss the events as they unfold on screen. We encourage you to watch along with us, and if you haven't watched the episode yet, you should watch it first, as we spoil things as they happen and before they happen. Tomorrow or later in the week, we will release a second episode where we dive into more details, more character motivations, and maybe some predictions for the next episode. If you're new to the show just in general and are unfamiliar with Evolved produces multiple Halo-related podcasts like Podcast Evolved, HCS Pro Talk, Mission Debrief, and Builds with Blocks. You can learn more about each of those shows on our website, evolvedhalo.co or halopodcast.com. Evolved also hosts another show called I Would Have Been Your Podcast, which is a Patreon exclusive show that we have for our subscribed patrons. If you want to learn more about what it means to be a patron, you can head over to patreon.com/haloevolved. Patrons also receive a variety of other exclusive rewards, such as early episodes, access to our original 18-song soundtrack, unique swag, and access to our private Discord channel. Shout out to our current subscribers. Thank you guys so much for keeping us afloat.
You guys are awesome!
We're almost at the end of Halo TV Plus for the second season, and it's so exciting for things that we have planned after the finale premieres next week.
Yeah.
So, Tom, can you give us a little bit of a recap of what happened last week on Onyx?
Yeah, sure thing. So obviously Onyx, the Shield world, and this was a really, really cool episode. So we start off with Perez in a battle simulation, and we learn very quickly that Perez has become part of the Spartan Freeze, and they are being trained on a mission to infiltrate a Covenant cruiser and spike it. And what's really cool to see is that Kai is in fact their instructor, so we get some different parallels than those we see in the novel here, with different characters filling some of the roles that other members of John's team fill within the novels, and it was just really cool to see Spartan Freeze in the universe, I think. Meanwhile, we've got John, Soren, Liara, Halsey and Quan landing on Onyx, and Soren and Liara head to the training facility where they search for Kessler. So this is quite cool because you see them kind of going in. They've got actually a simulation of Thermopylae that they end up going into, and some other stuff as well. And then you have Quan, who sees the similar well to the well which she saw on her homeworld. So she jumps down into a cavern, and while she's in the cavern even, she finds Halsey, who is also down there, and is familiar with it as somewhere that she's been to before. John then gets captured by Marines and is escorted back to the ONI headquarters, and we've got Parangoski and Ackerson who have some tension around trying to contain Chief, and I think in this whole episode it's really, really interesting because you kind of see a lot more of Oni, a lot more of the shadiest side of Parangoski, and the idea that at this headquarters they have already got like signs up that say fight in his name, in reference to Chief, and the idea that Chief has already died. So it's really interesting seeing that kind of dynamic where you have Parangoski really wanting to manipulate the narrative there and change things around Chief and what happened on Reach. You do get Kai and John reconnecting, and John essentially says to Kai that she should be questioning orders. Why is she following them blindly? And you get into quite a brutal fight sequence, actually, where Kai kicks John's ass, essentially, and she really does a number on the Chief, which is quite hard to watch, because you sort of see Kai very much in the position that John was in season 1, I'd say, where she's sort of doing her own thing before realising that she's in the wrong. You get Cortana, who finds her way back to Onyx, and inadvertently gets noticed by the Covenant. And you also have the Sangheili priest, who, when the priest notices that Cortana is working with McKee, the priest then attempts to kill McKee, and we get a really, really cool sequence where the Arbiter and some of the Sangheili that are loyal to the Arbiter are fighting against the priest and the priest's Sangheili, and it's a really, really cool sequence that sort of gives you really things that indicate the civil war in the Covenant sort of quite early on, which is awesome. And a little detail that I appreciated was the fact that the priest is an Emdama as well. I just thought that was quite cool to see that little reference to the priest there. And then lastly, you get John regaining consciousness, and he is led to the artifact with Cortana's assistance, and we then end the episode with Chief and McKee at kind of the same point, both interfacing with artifacts and looking to return to Halo.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, very exciting, a big cliffhanger, and we pretty much pick up
I think
right
that's me
after
done.
that moment. It's a direct pickup. Sorry, for some reason my thing was muted.
It's all good. I was like, I've spoken too long. Oran has gone to sleep.
Yeah, no, I basically just said, yeah, and we pick up directly where that scene sort of ends, and we kind of go right into the episode from there.
Yes.
So, are you ready to watch the episode? Watch Thermopylae?
Hell yeah.
We have a few details here. The synopsis of the episode is that John 117 comes face to face with McKee. A revelation leads Ackerson to question his loyalties. Soren and Liara their relationship begins to fracture, and Halsey, Quan, and Miranda work to solve a mystery. It was directed by Denny Gordon, runtime of 47 minutes 59 seconds, and it was originally aired on March 15th, 2024.
Awesome.
And it is the penultimate episode for season 2, so it definitely leaves on a cliffhanger as we get ready for the finale next week. So without any further ado, I'm going to count us in. Tom, are you ready to hit play?
I am.
All right. Listeners, we don't have commercials, so if you are a subscriber of Paramount Plus with commercials, you'll have to pause the podcast recording while you sit through your commercials, and then, or advertisements, I guess what they're called now, and then you can resume playing. So without any further ado, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. So Tom.
Yeah.
While we're getting our recap, I wanted to get your opinion and share your thoughts briefly that you've actually watched these first 7 episodes over the past 2 days before recording.
Yeah.
You kind of binged it. What was that experience like that I think is much different than most other listeners that are following along with us, where we've been having to begrudgingly wait week to week for each new episode?
So I just want you to know that binge is my commitment to you, right? Oran, that is how committed I am to Halo TV Plus. So that was actually a really, really interesting experience, because I sort of had been following some of the dialogue online. So I'd seen people, for example, kicking off about Chief not having armor on during the Fall of Reach and that kind of thing. And I think because I was watching it in sort of such quick succession, those moments that maybe would have frustrated me really didn't frustrate me, because I was so hooked into the story and what was happening, and I knew that I could kind of keep the momentum going, so I just kept seeing what was coming next, and that sort of meant that all of those moments that maybe wouldn't have paid off otherwise had the immediate payoff. And so I really enjoyed it in that format. And I think overall this season has done a really good job of pivoting away from some of the things that I didn't enjoy as much with season 1. I think a lot of these sort of extreme and ridiculous moments really haven't been that present in this season at all. And yes, the story is very different to what we've seen before, but it has a lot of beats that feel familiar, so I'm quite enjoying it.
Amazing. No, I think this season, more so than the first season, works better in one continuous stretch. And that's just kind of what I've noticed while kind of watching these episodes week to week. But we'll talk a little bit more about that on the analysis episode, and I think even on our recap that we do of the whole season after everything airs. But right now we get our beautiful vista shot of the ring. We are back here. We had a few of these moments on season 1. And John and McKee have this reunion of sorts. They're connected through the artifact, and I felt that this was kind of more or less like kind of an awkward sort of conversation between the two, because you don't see the two of them really, I don't know, rejoicing to see each other, because they've both, I think, have been going through their own trials and ordeals over the last couple of months since they last saw each other. And I think both of them are very polarized to their own viewpoints. I think McKee is still trying to get him to leave humanity, and she's trying to leave the Covenant, so then she can just kind of rule Halo. She almost feels like she has kind of a birthright to be at the Halo and be in control of it. Did you kind of get that sense? Because that's kind of how I interpreted the scene.
I think it's really interesting, actually, because McKee, more broadly, is one of my biggest sticking points. I really wish we would have had some kind of explanation as to how she survived the season 1 finale. But I think you're right that her character in this season sort of feels very much like she's on the same arc as in the first season, where she is just like determined to access the Halos. And she almost seems to, I think you're right, embody this sort of birthright where she feels like her and John are the only people who are worthy of having access to the ring, and that's it. And it's really interesting because actually that line that we just had, her saying we can build a world here, she almost embodies a god complex, which is really interesting in terms of the idea that she's constantly being referred to as a blessed one, and that has almost transcended how she identifies herself. She now feels that there is something unique and special about her, and so that's representative in how she behaves. I do just want to touch on something else quickly as well, which I found really interesting in this, which is I really like how the way they've designed the ring is so perfectly embodying Zeta Halo as well. Like, it's clear that was their visual reference point for it.
Yeah, it's very like almost ethereal and definitely otherworldly, even though it's, the biomes are very familiaristic to kind of just general Earth in a way. But it'll be great if we get more on the ring, either next episode or next season, assuming it's not destroyed or anything. But it's I do like the visual representation of the Halo in the TV show, and I just want more of it, and kind of just see the different biomes and environments, because the Halo itself has so many different areas and regions of its own that really create its own sort of location and character. But the Mendama reference, I'm glad you pointed that out, because of course
I didn't realize it was this episode. That's my bad.
Well, no, they could have mentioned it. I don't remember when we last noticed. I think maybe I only noticed this episode. But of course, that's a reference to the Mendama family, and Jewel Mendama is sort of the pseudo leader of the Covenant post Halo 3, and kind of as Halo 4 is kind of going around after the Covenant gets sort of destroyed and disbanded with the Great Schism and all that. And so it was a neat little reference. So I wonder if this means that his line won't continue and Jewel Mdama won't become a thing, or if maybe Jewel Mdama is just or they're brothers.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, right, this could be setting up Jewel as the enemy in a future season, because if he finds out that the Arbiter and McKee are responsible for a member of his family dying, maybe that leads to him hunting them down, and that could very easily get you to the kind of Storm versus Swords of Sanghelios storyline that you see in Halo 5.
Yeah, no, that's a great sort of seed that they planted if they wanted to, progress that kind of storyline. That's
Dude, I'm so happy we have the theme here just to jump in with that. It fits so well.
I love it how most of my guests comment on. Since I have a new guest every week, they always comment on the opening title sequence, and yeah, it is truly great. And we get the ring coming up here with the Gregorian chants, and it gives you all the feels.
It really does.
So. I do want to comment just on that last scene. Cortana, I think, really sees the benefit of allying with McKee, at least in the short term, and kind of helped the deception for her to, I guess, get a small energy sword and kill the priest there. So that I like that relationship, and I'm kind of curious how far it's going to go, because I don't want it to necessarily really continue too much farther, but I do like sort of the little bit of play and whether or not they should be trusting each other, and the kind of the calculated ways that Cortana's navigating her interactions with McKee, and I think later on you see the Sangheili or the Arbiter. So I think I really like that character dynamic that I wasn't really expecting to get at all, and so I do enjoy their screen time together.
It's a cool way of kind of embracing the sort of Arbiter-in-Chief uneasy alliance that you see in Halo 2, but obviously it expands it. So rather than it just being Chief and McKee, you have Cortana and some of the other Spartans as a part of that dynamic as well, which makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah. Exactly that.
Dude, on this, just with Akison and Parangoski talking at the table, I love how they planted the seed of Akison actually having his human side by showing his father and his sister. I thought that was really cool, because obviously I've not read the novels that Akison's in. I still need to read them, but I know that he's quite a hard ass in those novels, in the sense that he's very calculated and strategic. So I liked that here they decided to show that sort of human side of him as well, and what ultimately makes him question Oni.
Yeah, I like the what they're trying to do. I think they didn't sell it as well, and I can get into that a little bit, but I do like how the first half of the season Ackerson is really painted as the bad guy, and then in this episode in Onyx, they're really shifting that perception, and that Parangoski is the true mastermind behind the UNSC's decisions. And in this episode in particular, Ackerson starts to feel some remorse. I think it would have sold it a little bit better if we got, maybe we saved the reveal of the Spartan 3s for the episode Onyx, but we saw a little bit more of Ackerson caring about what he calls his life's work, because we haven't seen really at all him work on his life's work of the section of the Spartan 3s. So I think I would have preferred that seed being planted a little bit better, where maybe when John came in to say, hey, the Covenant are coming to Reach, and Ackerson dismisses him, but if he was like working on something and it was a little taste and it was obscured, and then he like swashes it away and then he gets into the scene. And I think giving him a little bit of that, or we see the kind of tension and stress and anxiety over these Spartan 3s of wanting them to work, I think would have maybe sold these interactions between him and Parangoski a little bit better.
Yeah,
but that being said, I do appreciate kind of the way they're kind of making Parangoski sort of the fall guy for the UNSC.
She's like the overarching villain. I think that the scene we've just seen as well, with Chief and the Oni operative standing down and sort of letting him go through, I really like how that builds on the speech that Chief and Keyes give in Reach, when they're talking about, obviously, the fact that the Chief is a human just like the other Marines, and it kind of grounds that character. And I think that's what I really like about the way actually they've handled Chief and his mythology around the Marines throughout this whole season, is it really gets into this idea of what is a soldier at the end of the day, what is the kind of person who wants to serve, what are their values, and what makes a good soldier? Is it listening to orders, or is it actually putting yourself on the line to protect other people who can't protect themselves? And I think the fact that you get Chief kind of saying to this soldier, look, this isn't right, look me in the eyes is a really nice callback to the kind of moral sacrifice that those soldiers on Reach make earlier in the season as well, and it really gets you to think about that moral and ethical quandary that comes with armed service, I think.
Yeah, because it's more so than just following orders, but I think the larger picture that John is trying to instill and point to is that we need to protect humanity, and the infighting and stuff and politics of it all is really what's detrimental from us, because it breaks us down on the inside within each other, whereas the true enemy is the Covenant out there and the Halo, that it can be used as a weapon if we're not careful and they find it first. So yeah, I roll my eyes whenever I see that female character, Briggs, I think.
Yeah.
A terrible villain, or in like a good way. Like you're supposed to not like her, and so I continue to not like her when she's on screen. So it's they've really done her character well in that regard. So I think we'll skip over what Miranda and them are doing over in the cave, because we're going to cut back to them because we're here. I found this to be interesting because this shows you a little bit of what the Spartan 3s were actually created for, which are basically cannon fodder for impossible missions. And it seems that Ackerson wasn't really wanting that to be the objective, and he cares for each individual life of his Spartan 3s, whereas Parangosky is more true to kind of what the Spartan 3 program was bred to be in core canon, where it was suicide missions. You throw as many as you can to get the mission done. As long as the mission's complete, survivors and casualties, that those numbers don't matter.
It's all losses are acceptable as long as the mission's completed, aren't they?
Exactly.
And I really like this because I think it really gets to the heart of ONI, which is ONI as an organisation do absolutely abhorrent things, but they do them for ultimately the right reason. So Parangosky knows that if she sacrifices, say, 100 Spartan 3s, that might buy her the time to save another planet. That might buy the UNSC the time to develop other technology. So she's playing the long game, but what you then have is that balance where actually, in order to protect humanity, she's losing her humanity itself. And that, I think, is a whole through thread of this season, is actually what are you willing to sacrifice to save humanity, and is it worth the cost?
Yeah, and I think that's the more, I think, morality discussion, because it's, although she is saying that, like, look, we have all these sacrifices, but this is the end game. We have to do this. It's the humanity of it. It's like, well, that is such a large cost. Like, you seem like a terrible person to throw these lives at this unpenetrable wall until we barrel down and get a crack and we slip in and complete it. And it's an interesting and it's a good dynamic to have different characters on that spectrum of morality, of kind of where is their line that they're willing to push. And it makes it very compelling, I think.
It really does. I think ONI is the thing that's been handled really well throughout this, so I've really enjoyed seeing it. I do think, on a separate note, just something cool I wanted to reference, I really like the idea of the VK-78 Commando being the weapon that the Spartan 3s use. Like, it was cool seeing that appear and it just seeming to be a weapon that's solely designed for them to use.
Yeah, because I don't know if that gun comes up in earlier in the season. The gunplay, I feel like this is kind of a critique on my end, but like when they're using like an assault rifle or the battle rifle or a DMR, it just kind of seems that they take these props and then the special effects or the visual effects and the audio team just kind of make it just any sort of automatic gun. Like, I don't get a sense that
DMR, for example.
They really give us the different type of weapon that those weapons actually are. But I do like that the kind of the uniformity of the Spartan 3s in that sort of Mirage armor, and then they also have the commandos that are, again, kind of standardized for all of them, it does kind of give them this great uniformity that of like this is the soldiers, or this is the army that is going out and doing their thing, or whatever. It just kind of gives them a nice uniform collective.
It does, and I think that uniformity comes back to what we were talking about with Oni as well, right? Which is essentially what Parangoski is doing with the Spartan Freeze is completely dehumanizing them. So they all have exactly the same armor, they all have helmets that cover their features. It's very, very hard to look at them and distinguish one from another, and I think that's quite deliberate because they're not... she's not viewing them as individual people, right? These are just sacrificable soldiers, and that again gets back to that thing that we were talking about almost stripping the humanity out of them, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
I can just feel how much you've missed my deep takes, Oran.
No, I have. I'm just encapsulated, and it's just, sometimes it's hard to respond. But that's why I really wanted you to be one of the guests. I know we had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so I'm glad we were able to squeeze you in.
Me too, man.
And get you here. So it's
hell yeah.
I welcome it, and that's why I love this show. Just kind of briefly, just because I get to talk to different people each week, and I enjoy it. I hope the listeners do. Now, here's a question. So, Perez has kind of been, she is one of the chief characters, so we do get a lot of screen time with her. But in the last episode and this episode, we see her interact with Kai and some of the other Spartan 3s. And there was that scene that just ended of her kind of trying to calm them down. Do you think that they're setting Perez up to being another leader type role, maybe in the future? Or do you think it's just kind of building her up to kind of give her a heroic sacrifice towards the end?
So I've seen a few people talk about whether Perez is being built up to be the Silver Timeline equivalent of Sarah Palmer, and I could easily see that, because when you think about Palmer's background, she was an ODST, right? So she was on the front lines, she saw exactly what happened, she had that combat experience, and then she worked her way up to become leadership, and I could see that with Perez, but equally I think there's something quite powerful about her potentially making a sacrifice, especially when you think about it in the context of it being a suicide mission. So her making a sacrifice, thinking she's going to save everyone, but actually it just buys them a little bit more time and that's it. And I feel like that's quite a Halo trope. Like, if you look at Halo Reach, that feels a lot like George's sacrifice when he destroys the supercarrier and then suddenly the rest of the fleet appears. So I think that might be an interesting way of paying off that idea of making an ultimate sacrifice but then it not meaning anything anyway. But I'm curious to see if they take it in that direction, because I feel like we've lost one of the more charismatic sort of human military characters with the death of Keyes in this season. So I do wonder if maybe they'll carry her forward to fulfill some of those story arcs.
I hope so. I really like Perez. I also really like Kai. And kind of seeing them at the end of this episode just leaves me a little nervous of kind of what's to come.
Because it feels like I fully have the feeling, and I know this is jumping ahead, but I really get the feeling that Kai is going to go and sacrifice herself to save the Spartan Freeze.
I could see that as well, which is what I'm a little nervous about.
Yeah.
Now here we have Ackerson doing a simulation test on the spike, and it's a little, I'm curious of kind of how this even, like, how he didn't know. I guess it's like they just were going to do this spike and take control of the ship, and then he was like, oh, well, actually, it's going to blow up their fusion reactors and then destroy, like, the galaxy or something like that. Like, it just seemed kind of an interesting, strange plot point when I was watching this.
I feel like it's emphasizing that Parangoski is keeping stuff from him as well. Like, we think of him as a character who's got a lot of overreaching influence, but actually what this shows us is he doesn't know everything either. And I think it's really interesting because with his character specifically, with his discussions with Cortana, we know that his decisions are very mathematically based, so he'll, like, calculate simulations. But it's interesting seeing that clearly he had trusted whatever Parangoski told him initially, and when he finally decides to do his own simulation, it shows that what she said was a lie. So I think this is kind of him realising that he's getting played as well, which makes sense, because when it comes to Oni, ultimately we know that people like Parangoski play everyone, and they're all just pawns in a chess game for them, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. You say it so well.
If it's not obvious, I really enjoyed watching this season.
No, that's good. I'm happy that you're enjoying it. I kind of have been having kind of a slider effect to where I really like an episode. I get a little frustrated with an episode. I didn't find Onyx to be overly enjoyable. I kind of I think I was more frustrated with the last episode. This one, I kind of get that it's the calm before the storm in a sense.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, and I do like. So I guess we could finally talk about it. So we have the Miranda, Kwan, and Halsey sort of sequence that they keep cutting back to, and it seems that they've kind of moved the library that is in or on Halo rings and kind of moved it to some degree into Onyx. I don't remember this type of vault or chasm being in Onyx in kind of the books that I've read, but I mean there is sort of an underground infrastructure, of course, because it's a Dyson sphere, but what they're talking about, to where they found DNA and they found something that's kind of human but also something else, and they even get into the room when they get there. That to me, that's kind of the show's interpretation of what the library is, where the index is from CE. And I like that it's being visually represented, and I guess it's okay in the sense that I guess I didn't need to wait to be on the ring to kind of get all this information. It would have been cool just because that's where it is. But I then just question really Kwan and how she's able to really put all these dots together. Where Halsey and
quite
Miranda
literally
have been studying it for years and years and years. And that's kind of my gripe with this scene as well. So again, I'm really fascinated with what they're doing, but I've been screaming at Kwan, or really at the white writers, to make Kwan relevant, and I want to care about her. And then it just seems that here's why you need to care about her, but it's just to get to this point was just completely meaningless. She just all of a sudden is here now, and this is what she's doing. It's I'll talk about that more so in the analysis, but that kind of gave me a little bit of a, I don't know, off-putting.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because they essentially, what they're saying is her and John, with last episode us finding out that she chose John because of DNA, essentially. Her and John seem to have the Forerunner Daesh, but they seem to have it already. So whereas in Halo 4, the librarian does that augmentation to you, and then suddenly you can interface with technology, it seems here that's sort of an inherent birthright that certain humans are born with, and they can just integrate with Forerunner technology. I find it's interesting in a sense that, she's had this her whole life and it's what she's been leaning towards, but I don't think they build it up right, to your point. I think it's kind of just a sudden reveal where it's oh, Kwan can do this, and there's nothing it really feels like it leads to it beyond a couple of shoehorn scenes. The thing that I always think about is what happened to, I can't remember the planet's name, but her home planet. Madrigal. What happened to the monitor that we saw come out of the portal? Because wouldn't that have been a lot more of a natural transition to suddenly have them come back to this planet, but with the monitor, and then the monitor explains how to do things to unlock the doors? That would have felt like a much more natural story progression for me. So it's interesting to see how they were kind of building up some of the aspects to do that story, but then didn't necessarily stick the landing.
Yeah, no, not at all. We could dive into this further, because it's kind of a rabbit hole that I
It
think
really
is. It's my main gripe with this episode. I think is Klein's
Yeah.
sort of inclusion in all this, and because everything else I more or less enjoy. Like I kind of like Chief basically giving Ackerson a chance to redeem himself in that previous
Yeah.
scene. Like he's holding him up by his neck, basically asking Kai, give me a reason to spare his life, right, and not punch a hole through him. And Kai's like, I can't think of one. And so like there's these, again, this idea of kind of morality and kind of like doing the right thing after all of the wrong things that you've done, and finding your redemption arc, I think is, I was okay with all that, and I think it's nice and giving a little bit of a conclusion and kind of setting up a resolution for the end of the season, however it ends up. Because I don't know what's going to happen to Parangoski and Ackerson, but I wouldn't mind seeing more of them kind of continue to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And kind of cause rifts here and there.
Yeah, well, there's going to be an even more interesting dynamic there now because there's a rift between them, which there wasn't before. So I'd like to see them explore that a little bit more. I will say to my point, or to a point even, around the Forerunners, I do think there's some very valid criticism about their visual representation. Like, within the Forerunner universe, within the Halo universe, these have always been, like, highly technological beings who are years ahead of our technology. So it feels quite weird that so much of the Forerunners in this show are stone-based. I don't know why, but it feels more like a callback to sort of the ancient ruins you'd see on, say, Zeta Halo or on Delta Halo in Halo 2 than it does sort of what I would associate with Forerunners. But I guess you could make the argument that this is that sort of like older Forerunner technology, and then you've got your newer technology on the Halo rings. It feels a little bit weird to me.
We do get a glimpse of that when they go beyond this door, right?
Yeah.
And Halsey kind of gets awestruck and almost falls off the light bridge because she stares at what she says is like an underground city. And I definitely see more of that more classic Forerunner architecture that we get from the games.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that didn't really irk me, kind of looking at this and kind of seeing the difference between the more stone architecture and then the more, I guess, metal architecture. Halsey did make a note to where when she went down there, she was like, that wall shouldn't be there. That wall was supposed to be over there.
Yeah.
Which kind of implies that even though these are stone structures, even when they retrieved the DNA sample and then the sort of key, I guess, for this door, like the stone structure sort of moved and revealed like a little plate, but that plate lit up and glowed. And
yeah, that is true. There's elements of technology interwoven, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, it's kind of integrated into the stone. So
yeah.
I think it's an interesting choice that it's a little bit of a departure, but then you get these scenes and this.
Dude, I love this light bridge so much.
Yeah, this is great. No, I was definitely feeling this when I was watching it for the first time. But when she gets to the other side, like, that's not a 1-to-1 Forerunner door that you would get, but it's pretty close. Like, you kind of get the pyramid-looking shape and the sort of like silhouette above the door. So it's it's great, and I want to see more of it, man. Like, we need to be on the ring and see more cool Forerunner shit.
I'm curious as to how they're gonna, and this is something I'm sure we'll talk about more in the analysis, but I'm really curious as to how they're gonna play out the story on the ring, because presumably that becomes a season 3, but right now we don't have the Pillar of Autumn or anything, so my biggest question is how do we get so many forces onto the ring, and what does that look like? Like, I initially thought that the ring that Halsey, Miranda and Quan were working around was going to be like a Stargate, but obviously it's not. It's just the passageway into the city. So I'm really curious to see how we get to the point of having like UNSC forces on the ring.
Yeah, we'll throw some theories at the wall on the analysis and see what we think. I have one or two thoughts, and we can kind of unpack that when we get to it. But this was a great scene. This was kind of the farewell scene between Chief and Kai, which I wanted to chat about. Kai wants to protect her Spartan 3s. She knows that it's basically a suicide mission, but it is a defense against the Covenant. And John is more so the mindset, and like, well, no, it doesn't matter if we defeat that Covenant fleet. What matters is getting to the Halo, because even if we destroy most or all of the fleet, more Covenant forces can always just come, and then if they get, if we kill ourselves killing them, they'll outnumber us and eventually get to the Halo. And so you have this great scene where the two of them are kind of stone set on kind of where they believe they should be fighting, and they're they're both okay with having a different path and a different choice, and you kind of get this nice farewell that presumably could be the final farewell between these two characters.
I think it will be, because I think that Riz kind of took Linda's story where she was too injured to continue fighting, and obviously we know that happens with Linda, but it's different in the sense that she goes into cryo. But I genuinely feel like Kai is quite on course to sacrifice herself now.
Yeah, so and you haven't read Ghosts of Onyx?
No.
Oh man, well, don't want to spoil it for you, but she's basically the character Kurt.
Yes, I know. Well, I know Kurt's fate, so
yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
So this is something we'll dive into on the analysis, but I do want to touch on the environment. So this is when you look at the vials, I sort of see this room being the TV show's interpretation of the library, where you have all these different DNA structures. I mean, I don't know why it just starts collapsing and shattering.
Well, I heard something really interesting. I saw an interesting theory online where somebody was like, this is the start of the release of the flood, and the reason why it's cracking is because the installation's trying to contain it. I don't see anything that hints at that, really, but it's an interesting perspective.
Well, I mean, in the games, they are just kind of in a random room on the ring, and that's what just releases the flood, because they were just dormant and locked behind a wall. But it would seem kind of weird that, like, the key to get in is just also right outside the door. But I guess you'd have to know about the star map clock sort of puzzle from the rubble to get in there. So maybe, I mean, I don't know. I'm starting to hurt my brain, but what we just saw, when Halsey was saying, imagine the technology. There's a city that's built down there. Like, it would really be interesting to see more of that Forerunner architecture, like we just said.
Yeah.
So now Kwan has a line here where she says, I think, growth? Yeah, there it is, growth. And she talks about the monster that she's kind of whispered throughout the season, and I think early on we predicted that it could be the Covenant, but it could be the Gravemind, because the Gravemind's kind of more of a monster than the Covenant. And again, like, maybe we'll get some sort of revelation in the last episode of what she's been up to, kind of between season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it would be interesting, and again, a departure if this is the release of the flood.
I tell you what would be interesting, and this would sort of alleviate some of your concerns about Kwan suddenly knowing all this information. It would be interesting if we find out that in that 6 months she's been corrupted by the Gravemind, and maybe she's hearing the Gravemind, and that is what's driving her to try and get to the ring. Is obviously for John and for Makee, it's to stop the Covenant and the UNSC for using it, but maybe for Kwan it's to actually release the flood.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot about Kwan, I think, in the analysis, because I mean that is a theory. I just feel like if that's true, it wouldn't have been interpreted well, because I don't really get a sense of urgency from her for the entire season.
Yeah, that's very true.
And that's another sort of thing like that. So yeah, we'll talk about her.
Who would have ever imagined with season 1 that our analysis episode for season 2 would hinge around Kwan? Who could have predicted that, right?
Well, yes. Yeah. I'll talk about it in there. I have thoughts, but I like this scene. The
Yeah,
first time I watched it, I thought it was weird, and I was just like, okay, I guess I get the symbolism that she's doing. But the more I watch it, I actually enjoy it. It's like it's her. It's kind of like the other sort of visual um, action that has
yeah,
been shown in other sort of stories and stuff of like people slicing their hand and like they're bleeding to show their loyalty to whatever sort of like pirates or whatever type of medieval or sci-fi story in that. And so I kind of get the same vibe of that, is that she effectively has failed. And so much like like to get the arbiter role, you have to fail greatly and have dishonor upon your race and all that kind of stuff, and you get the mark of
yeah,
shame and you hold the arbiter title. And I think I always say that, I think McKee feels a little bit of that because she wasn't able to convince John, and she needs John in order to activate the artifacts. And so
yeah,
to her, I feel like she has this sense of guilt and defeat and failure that she is burdened with. And the fact that the arbiter has still believes in her and has effectively given her a second chance because he killed all the infidels, she now feels compelled to bear the mark of shame and become an arbiter in her own way, and
yeah.
to now go on this path to redeem herself and regain her quote unquote honor and claim the ring and all that. So that's how I'm interpreting it anyway, and that's kind of what I'm liking, and I think it'll be a good dichotomy and sort of parallel between the two of them trying to regain themselves and regain their honor.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because she, in many ways, she has failed because ultimately it's Cortana who has to play a part in saving her as well. So she's gone on this whole mission against humanity, and at the end of the day, it's a humanity that still saves her. So that for somebody who's tried to detach herself so much from it must be quite difficult to process.
Yeah.
I love this scene so much. I love how this gets
This
to
is a good one.
yeah, like the juxtaposition between the Spartan 3s and the Spartan 2s, but also, again, Chief's mythology and what he means to these people, like the amount of people who look up to him and aspire to be like him. I think this season does a really good job of leaning into that, from the speech with Keys in Reach, to seeing the holograms of Chief in the city streets before that, to seeing the posters after his supposed death, to then seeing this in this episode. It really does a good thing of giving us a real sense of what an icon Chief is to humans, but then how much that iconography motivates people to join the UNSC and to serve in the war as well.
Yeah, I mean, you see it on her face. Like, she's kind of just filled with glee and hope. And, like, wow, the Chief's alive. Like, if you can survive Reach, you can survive anything.
Exactly.
And like, and after sort of her sort of ordeal over the last couple of days of going through the simulation and proving herself and all that kind of stuff, that, yeah, you're right. That, like, Chief does, embody this huge symbol of hope and determination and kind of transcends otherwise what normal UNSC and military personnel have.
Yeah.
And basically what he's saying is that I need to do my own thing, but you continue doing what you're doing and hold on to it and believe in yourself, and you can, not necessarily that you can do the same thing as me, but he's trying to at least pass on the, I don't know, not burden, but try to leave her with something that still doesn't take the hope away from her since he's not going with her.
I think he's almost like sharing his heroism, right? And he's like saying,
yes.
You are a hero in the same way that you look up to me as a hero.
Yeah, that's a better well put. So, and she,
I again, this, just to get back to what you were saying earlier, though, this scene easily feels like it could be a goodbye as well, because she references either coming back alive or coming back dead, and says she's comfortable with both.
Yeah. I think it's also just kind of just leading into, like, the ambiguity of what's going to happen next for the viewer.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it ends it on a note that I think she'll, maybe not on screen necessarily, but she'll remember in the end, or in that one of those possible final moments, that even if she left it a little bit upset or disappointed, it'll strengthen her at the end of the day and give her whatever motivation she needs to make that final push to deliver the spike herself, or make that whatever sacrificing blow, or whatever it be.
I find it really interesting in this scene. I'd never really noticed it until now, but the artifact doesn't look like a traditional index key. What it's reminding me of more so than anything is the Janus key.
Okay. I didn't make that parallel. I was more so curious, and this is more of a story thing, of like, Halsey's supposed to be this like wanted woman, but she's just in the science facility with Miranda. Like, does no one remember? Like, does no one remember what happened?
That's in the past, Oran. It's fine.
Anyway, it's these little plot.
I mean, there's bigger concerns. They've got a zombie in the base as well, apparently, because Chief's meant to be dead.
Yeah. Well, you get this scene right here. Like,
this
people
is
actually
so
notice
good
him,
with
and
all
they're
of
like,
them. Yeah,
oh, wow,
like looking
back.
at him and just being in awe is incredible. You can tell at this point filming it, Pablo was like, "Hell yeah, I'm the big cheese."
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's finally back in the armor. Like, he hasn't been in the armor since the beginning of episode 3.
Yeah.
So, but
I love how here Parangoski knows what Ackerson's done as well, so again, the idea that she's always a step ahead.
But why? Yes, but it's like she doesn't really do anything. Like, it's not like two guards come on either side of him and be like, "You betrayed me," and then they like take him and pull him away, and you don't know what happens to him. He just walks. He like says, "This is what's going on," and then she defends herself on like. I think this is where she says, like, it doesn't matter how many we throw at them. All that matters is that one of them plants the spike.
Yeah. I think this is where she realises how much he's gone against her, though. Like, up until this point, she's kind of still had control of him. And then now she's like, okay, he's gone further than I thought. And he's actually against me now. You know, it's that perception of anyone who uses other people, right? You can use them until they show that they're going to go against you, at which point they lose their value. And that's exactly what Ackerson's just done to her. She now feels he doesn't have any value. And
that's what happened to Master Chief in the first season. Like, in episode 1, when he defects and leaves, Parangoski goes to Halsey and is like, I was like, why is our biggest asset doing this? Like, we need to kill him. And then Halsey and even Keyes are like, wait, what? Like, no, he's the Master Chief. But Parangoski's like, well, if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, then he's a liability, and we got to get rid of liabilities.
Yeah.
Like, case closed.
I do wonder, right? I really wonder if we're going to get to the Halo ring, or if Chief is going to decide to go and see the Spartans instead. I mean, I know at the end we get the whole reveal, but I wonder if he is going to decide to go and rescue them instead. Just with him looking at this coin, you can tell he's really thinking about it. And I wonder if they're teasing us that we're going to see Halo at the end of the season, and we're actually not. He's going to go and try and rescue the Spartan Freeze instead.
Well, yeah, we can chat about that, but just to...
So, Oren, there's an interesting detail there where he's come out next to this fleet. So is he not where the Spartan Freeze are?
No, the Spartan 3s are still on the way.
Okay.
So I think everybody is going to the Halo. I think everyone, like, the Covenant found the Halo. Cortana pinged their location, and they are going to where the Covenant are, which is where the Halo is. Because you see here, he looks up and he sees it. I forget the name of the planet that the Halo is next to. But I think this battle here is basically the Battle of Halo, if you want to call it that. And so the Spartan 3s are about to show up. He just showed up, and so it's all gonna crescendo into a space battle, infiltration, and maybe Chief gets on the ring and we get some ring action. We'll
Chief's already had that in season 1.
Yeah. Oh, he got some action.
I think just as these end credits are rolling, this kind of rush towards the end, where it feels like it's going to be a really climactic finale, sort of gets to the heart of what my biggest issue with this season has been, where I feel like we're going to have a lot to fit into the final episode, right? Like, there's so many things to resolve, and we want a lot of action as well. And I think that's the same with the Fall of Reach, where you kind of had the Fall of Reach done in an episode. It worked well enough, but I do think, what would it have been if it was stretched over more? And I feel like I'm going to feel that way about the finale as well.
Well, what do you think needs to be wrapped up?
I think we need to know what happens with the Spartan Freeze, and we need to set the stage for season 3. So is season 3 going to be UNSC and Covenant forces landing on the ring and fighting? What is that going to look like? And I think we also need to understand, what are the rest of the Covenant thinking at this point, now that the Arbiter and McKee have gone rogue?
See, I think this episode kind of just sets up a fight and sort of like a capture the ring first sort of dynamic.
Yeah.
Where I think really the thing that this show just needs to wrap up is who has control of the ring and what happens at the end of this fight. Because there is a giant fleet. And so yeah. I think that there will be the Spartan 3s, like, they'll fight and they'll, whatever will happen. I don't really think that we'll get any type of resolution onto all of the Spartan 3s, because really we only care about Perez and Kai. And so it's just a matter of what happens to them. And then John and McKee are going directly to the Halo. So I think it's kind of what we'll see in this next episode is who gets to the Halo first, and just whether or not it gets destroyed, which I really hope it doesn't, because it would, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of what made Halo.
I'm going to give you my prediction, and are we betting on this, Oran?
I don't know. Do you think it's going to get destroyed?
So I'll give you my prediction. I think we're doing a Halo Infinite story. Because I think this has been developed alongside Halo Infinite, right? So I reckon what's going to happen is they're going to successfully spike the Covenant ship, it's going to explode, and that's going to cause the Halo Ring slip space portal to activate. So the Halo Ring is going to go somewhere else in the galaxy, the UNSC won't know where it's gone, the Covenant won't know where it's gone, and season 3 is going to be Chief and the surviving Spartan Freeze, plus McKee, the Arbiter, and any of the Covenant who make it onto the ring, fighting for dominance of it, while the UNSC and the Covenant try to work out where it's gone.
I love that idea.
There we go. Paramount, if you'd like to hire me, I'm at Tom_Jurassic on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, I never considered the idea of following Halo Infinite. I think everyone just assumed, well, they just had the Fall of Reach, therefore we have to go and do Halo CE and do all that kind of stuff. But the whole idea of this show is that it's an adaptation, right? It's not a retelling of core canon. It is literally like when you go watch a movie or Dune, it's based off of a book, or a true story is based off of real
I think
events.
the line it actually says in the credits is inspired by the Halo universe.
Does it say inspired?
I think so. I've rewatched it, I can't find it, but I'm sure when I was watching on Xbox, I saw it somewhere say inspired by.
I thought it said based by, but...
That's really become my sort of thought process with this season, though, is... Yes, this is Halo, but it's a different reimagining of the same universe. So we have the same core components to play with, we have the same characters, we have the same locations, but when we get to there, who gets there, what happens there is very different, and that's the whole point of them doing the Silver Timeline, I think the whole community was very apprehensive about it not being a retelling of the games, but now we know that it's not. Why not embrace that? And why not go in different directions and do things that maybe are different to what we see in the games? Because ultimately that's what's going to make it more compelling television, is if you can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, but I mean, I like kind of knowing a little bit of the source material and kind of seeing where they like I like the idea that Kai is basically becoming Kurt, and it's like I know who Kurt is, I know what Kurt does, and his journey throughout the book and his relationship with the Spartan 3 is like, I love all that. I don't need Kai to do every single point that Kurt does, but what I do like is how Kai's role in this latter half of the season has been more or less the Kurt character reimagined to fit the TV show, and that's what I like, and it's really interesting to see that unfold in a new way, knowing the source material. And same thing with like the library. It's like, okay, well, I know what the library is from Halo, but they're wrapping it in this way that it's on this planet Onyx, or this Dyson sphere Onyx, and Halsey and Miranda and I guess Quan are trying to learn and see what it is. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but that's supposed to be that parallel. I guess it's the parallels that I'm more focused on, that like I don't need a 1-to-1, because that's not what the show is. If the show is trying to do that, then I'd be more critical on the fact that it's not 1-to-1. But what I do want from a story that's based off of this franchise that I devote so much of my time and passion towards is to have those parallels and to see those connections, like the Spartan board in the first 2 episodes, like just to see Omega Team and like Gold and like these other Spartan teams, and to get Cobalt Team in the beginning, that it's just another Spartan team, like that just gives us more depth into like, there are other Spartan 2s out there. I didn't need Cobalt Team to be Noble Team, like I don't need that 1-to-1.
Can you imagine if they had been, and then we just see their dead bodies, and that's it?
Yeah, or even Silver Team. Like Silver Team, you could argue in a way is Noble Team, because they were there on Reach and they did what they did, and Vanek dies and Kai goes away and Riz retires. So you kind of could argue that there's a little bit of a parallel there, but again, it's not a 1-to-1. So I think that's at least that's how I've been sort of being okay with the show and accepting what it is, because it's not a 1-to-1 remake. It's merely paralleling the source material with different events on screen. And then I have a few gripes here and there because I'm an old man yelling at the clouds, but in its core, like I try to really critique the show from a story standpoint and a plot hole standpoint and a characterization standpoint. And that's why I have so much to say about Quan, because it's just built to this moment to where now she's like one of the most important characters, and she's done pretty much nothing this entire season.
Yeah, it doesn't feel particularly rewarding.
Miranda should have been revealed like episode 2. Like that's like Miranda is just so wasted.
I agree with that.
We'll talk 100%. About all of that on the next episode.
So do make sure to come back and join us.
Yes. So do you have any final thoughts about this episode of Thermopylae? I mean, we didn't talk at all about Soren and Liara because their story is kind of iffy.
Honestly, I don't need their story.
yeah, and that's kind of my point. But is there anything else you want to talk about Thermopylae, the episode as a whole? Any sort of final closing thoughts, and then we'll kind of continue this conversation of the whole season that we've seen so far, what we want about the next episode, maybe a little bit of talk about season 3, but we'll keep kind of those predictions on that next episode. But just talking about Thermopylae, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah. So I'd summarize it by saying I love the fact that they chose a name from the Roman Empire for this that parallels the Spartans, because this is very much the Empire falling, which is Parangoski's reign finally starting to crack. So I'm excited to see how they build on that.
Oh, that's so well put and concise. I didn't even... Yeah, I guess I didn't make that parallel.
And I've just completely butched that parallel because it's Greek, not Roman, so ignore me.
Oh, yeah, it is Greek, yeah. Well, I mean, Thermopylae
so close.
And that battle is actually pretty it's a core element in the core canon, and it's
Yes.
a core foundation. I guess it's the Greek Empire is talked about a lot in the development of the Spartan 2 program, and when Deja, which is the AI teacher, is telling the Spartans how what to study from Earth's histories and the UNSC's histories to learn battle tactics and other sort of game plans, they reference the Battle of Thermopylae as being such a monumentous standoff between the Greeks and the Persians, and they've even mentioned it and foreshadowed it a few times in this season. Key says it earlier, and then Soren kind of gives you a little bit of a backstory of it in this episode where they're talking about Kessler. So yeah, I think you're right. It is this final stand from all of our characters. It's John having his final stand about what he's been saying this whole time. We have Parangoski having her final stand to try to put the Spartan 3s on the ship, and it's all lining everything up into a defense and an attack as we launch ourselves into the next episode and the finale.
Hell yeah. And with that note, why don't we launch ourselves into recording our next episode?
Yeah, there we go. I did go back to the credits while we were just talking, and it does say based on the Halo video game universe. So, but which I think makes more sense. I think that is a more accurate description than inspired by, because like I feel like inspired by would be if they took the name Halo, they literally put a Halo in there, and they put a super soldier in a suit, and then changed everything else. But
I mean, there's still time to do that, right?
You're right. Maybe season 3 will be inspired by. So, but in any event, yes, let us wrap it up there. We're just over an hour, and I think we have a lot to talk about on the next episode, so be sure to join us. But listeners, thank you much for joining Tom and I for this commentary episode for Thermopylae. Tom, I can't wait to continue this conversation, but thank you for joining me for this episode again, and we were able to make this schedule happen.
Hell yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into the analysis.
Halo the series premieres exclusively on Paramount Plus every Thursday, and the season finale for season 2 is next week, which is, March 21st, I believe. If you're interested, Paramount Plus produces a Halo after-show segment called Halo the Series Declassified, which releases alongside each TV episode. For this week, for Thermopylae, Sydney Goodman interviews Jen Taylor, the dearest and beautiful woman that she is, that plays Cortana, or the voice. She has an interview, as well as Charlie Murphy, who plays McKee. They also talk about Cortana and sort of her changes from season 1, kind of how they modeled her, and then the motion capture actress that plays her. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, you can find every episode to all of our shows that Evolved produces on our website, evolvedhalo.co, or you can search halopodcast.com. Don't forget to check us out on our social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I guess maybe not TikTok anymore. I don't know if you saw that. There's U.S. governmental meddling going on.
Only's getting involved in the real world.
Yeah, I'll stop talking. Once again, another shout out to all of our patrons for their continued support. Thank you guys so much. Head over to patreon.com/HaloEvolved to learn more. If you like this episode, rate us and leave us a review. Greatly appreciate all the feedback that we receive from our listeners to improve the quality of our shows. Again, you can email us at podcastevolved@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail on our Google phone number at 205-EVOLVED, which is 205-386-5833. And with that, Tom, thank you for joining me. Your listeners, I've been your host, Oran, and until next time, evolve.